Gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be a pretty quick sort of a quick video tonight. We start officially at 5 o'clock, so I always ask as you guys come on. First thing we do is we, kind of acquaint ourselves and start a little conversation. I am going to try to watch as much as I can. Clearly, want to talk about a little bit is the fact that, okay. Got a good question from Barney. To decant or not to decant? This is something that I really am passionate about. The only wine I do not decant unless I'm just doing a little tasting on camera. I really love to decant every single thing. If I'm going into the market showing wines, and I know I'm going to be in the market for just one day with those wines, I will decant them. Whites, pinks, and reds. Young wine loves air. Wine is like gasoline. It's a bad analogy if you're drinking it. But wine is like gasoline in this way, that you don't smell gasoline, you smell the vapors coming off the gasoline. You don't smell the wine, you smell the vapors that are coming off the wine. So when you have wine in your glass and you're swirling it, you're exciting the wine on a molecular basis and putting it into a vapor phase. Vapor phase goes into the bowl of the wine. And when we smell it, we get a nice big aromatic hit in our olfactory senses. Young wine, if you guys have probably drank lots and lots of young wine. You probably know on average, a young wine tastes better the second day it's open. And I think this is true of almost all wines, except wines that have been hit with Michel Rolland's micro-oxygenation techniques, where they pump the dissolved oxygen in the wine. So the wine shows really, really bright and beautifully for a couple of years, and then it falls apart. So a lot of wines that are produced for early consumption and to get some critical success, you're going to find that those wines already have enough oxygen. But in general, I would say wines over $15, and definitely all wines over $30, they are not probably micro-ox. They're probably not already oxygenated, and they were probably put in bottle between half a part and a part per million of dissolved oxygen in solution. I like to put our wines and the wines back when Chand and I made wines for Clopepi, and the wines we make at J. Wilkes with the help of all the wonderful people in the cellar. We like, the low dissolved oxygen, which means the wines can age for many, many, many years. Or if you don't have time to let them age and develop a little bit of dissolved oxygen in the bottle, because it does increase very, very small every year that it's in the cellar, you can put it in a decanter. Put it in a decanter, splash it in, rock it around, give it as much air as possible, and then I think that wine will peak within, between a half hour and a couple hours. Now, if I'm taking the wines into the market and I know I'm going to do half a bottle one day and half a bottle the next, I won't decant them, and I'll just open them up, pour them the first day, and then pour them the second day. But what I find is I tend to sell more wine on the second day because all the wines taste better. So do I decant whites? Yes. And then the decanter on ice, not in an ice bath. Decant Chardonnay? Absolutely. Decant Rosé? Absolutely. The only wine I don't decant, two wines I don't decant, ironically. Well, one's not ironically, one's obvious. I don't decant sparkling wine. That would just be silly. And then the other wine that I wouldn't decant is an old wine. Why wouldn't I decant an old wine? Isn't that what it's for, to remove the sediment? Well, first of all, 90% of wines purchased in the United States are consumed within 48 hours of purchase. Okay, so most people's cellar is either the UPS truck these days on the way to their house, or basically, the back of the Escalade coming back from a place where you can still buy wine. Now, the shape of a wine bottle, and I'm going to actually borrow this bottle from our friend. So why the Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, some Rhones, and some wines, why are they in this bottle? And why are Cabernets, Merlots, Nebbiolos, big heavy reds in this style bottle? Well, for Pinot Noir, and this bottle is a burgundy shape, so traditionally for Pinot Noir, this is all the shoulder you need to decant the wine in the bottle, because you have such fine amount of sediment in Pinot Noir that this shoulder, if you pour it carefully, if I had a candle where my thumb is and I was above this wine looking down on it, I would pour clean wine, clean wine, clean wine, letting the sediment stay down here in the soft shoulder. And then as soon as I noticed some sediment in the bottle, I would stop, put it down, and let it rest until it settles again. Takes a little bit longer, but if you do it carefully at table, you really don't have to do it very much, and you can get it down to the last few ounces without really having any problem with sediment. Now, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Nebbiolo, many other grapes. Tempranillo, for sure, comes in this hard-shouldered bottle. Why? Because it throws a lot of sediment, and you're going to get a lot of tannin in the wine. Port, same way. So again, as you decant it, if you open an old bottle, the last thing you want to do if you open a 61 Bordeaux, $3,000, $5,000, $12,000 wine, is to dump it in a decanter or to decant it carefully into the decanter or pour it through some type of cheesecloth or a sieve, a screen to capture the sediment. Really, I think that amount of oxygen, giving that old wine oxygen, that wine might be dead by the time you put it in your mouth. So decant everything but old wine. And then old wine, decant it from the bottle that it's in, because that's what the bottle was designed back somewhere between the 15th and the 17th centuries when modern glass bottles really came into normal use. And you can see that quite a bit, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries when they became normalized. And that's really, there's a great wine bottle museum. I believe it's in Beaune. So check it out. It's a beautiful city, and as soon as we can travel again. So we're going to do barrel burner, and I thought it would be fun for me to talk about opening the wine for 30 seconds. I do have most of my level 3 WSET. What does that mean? It means I don't know how to open wine because it's not the quartermaster sommeliers, but I know how to talk about it. I've passed basically my tasting on level 3. But there's really 2 ways to open a bottle of wine. You can either put the knife of the corkscrew under the flange and turn it. And that's the way I do it, and that's the way I teach people who are just learning to open wine to do it, because there's much less of a chance that the knife will slip the flange and cut you. Pro way to do it is to go over the flange, and you can sort of see I'm putting it right just maybe a quarter of an inch, a couple millimeters below. Now, the only problem here is if you slip, you're going to cut yourself. And so what comes off is just the top, and this is what I have left over. Now, you can put this aside, and I'll show you another cool trick. So now we have the bottle. I'm looking at the cork, and as I look at the cork, I'm going to put the worm right in the middle, stand it up straight, maybe give it 2 turns, make sure it's still perpendicular to the bottle, which it is, and then turn it into place, trying not to twist it or turn it and break the cork. And then this is has 2 different positions on this corkscrew, which is lovely. So I put the first one in, lift it up a little bit, second one in, lift it all the way up. Now here's the thing. I find it professionally to be less than optimal to pop the cork with the corkscrew. I like to pull the last inch or maybe quarter of an inch to half an inch out by hand and then straight up to my nose. And most of the corks we use in our company are supercritical corks. So they've been produced from natural cork in a laboratory to make sure they have absolutely 0 cork taint in whatsoever. Eddie's here, Nancy's here, a couple other people just came in, so that's awesome. And I will mention to Nancy and Eddie, like I promised everyone I wouldn't, if the Wes Hagen feed isn't as good, you can go over to J. Wilkes Wines, Santa Barbara, where the feed originates. And Mike, same deal. Thanks and welcome. So now I've got an open bottle of wine, which is the most exciting thing I have said all day. All right, so let's get to day drinking, because it's still day for most of us. Barrel Burner 2017 Cabernet Sauvignon just got 89 points in the Wine Enthusiast, and they gave it an editor's choice, which means it is absolutely delivering QPR, quality to price ratio. So QPR is really important in the world of wine right now. Everyone's looking for the great wines for a bargain. We're in a little economic questionable time, so everyone wants the biggest bang for their buck. So we have this fabulous wine. It also just got 90 points from the tasting panel. So 2 major magazines almost agreed what a point tastes like, which is pretty cool. So this wine spends about 6 months in bourbon barrels. About 50% of it goes to bourbon barrels, and then 50% of it is finished in a tank with staves. So it does have a bourbon barrel influence, although I don't find a lot of whiskey type flavors. We do a bourbon barrel, which is a collab. It's a collaboration with Buffalo Trace for J. Wilkes, and you really do get quite a bit of brown liquor character. This one's really on the edge of perception, which I really like. So this wine was made by Clay Brock, who was the winemaker of the year, Paso Robles, 2010. And it's on the shelf usually from about $13 to about $16. And if you bought it by the glass, it would cost you about $10 a glass in a restaurant. Remember restaurants? You'll notice the Thursday pour is a little thicker than the Wednesday pour. So again, one of my favorite times of the day. Not a lot of new wines that I'm getting to taste and do notes on. I do this regularly, is to produce tasting notes for most of the wines from the Miller Family Wine Company. Unless you read a really bad tasting note, then it was someone else. But it was never Phil. Phil never makes a mistake. So. I apologize. Actually, the wine in the whiskey barrels stayed in for a full year. So, and thank you. It really reminds me of pure Paso Robles. This is 100% Cabernet, 100% Paso Robles Highlands District, 100% French Camp Vineyard, which is one of our state vineyards. It's SIP certified, it's COG certified, so it's double sustainable certified. So we treat our dirt well, we treat the vines well, we treat the people well. It's a culture, and that's exactly what we try to produce. The wine, if I smelled it, it takes me somewhere between a sort of South Australian Cabernet and pure Paso, and a beautiful oak expression. It's not overly oaked. Remember what Brian Babcock taught me in 1996. Brian says, Wes, you cannot over oak a wine, but you can under wine the oak. I don't know if I agree. For 5 years, I used to tell that as a joke because I thought it was so ridiculous. But now, 22 vintages in this is my 25th vintage. I think I agree. Big wines can soak up a lot of oak. Montrachet, the greatest Chardonnay in the world, 200% new French oak. How's that possible? You ferment the juice in a brand new French oak barrel, $1,000 barrel, and then you take the juice from that new barrel after you fermented it for a few weeks and put it in another brand new $1,000 French oak barrel. That means for every bottle of Montrachet, $2,000. So it really doesn't matter. $6 to $7 per bottle just in oak cost. But then they turn around and sell those Montrachet barrels to sherry producers, to whiskey producers, to Scotch producers, to I've even seen, I think I saw a Montrachet barrel Japanese whiskey. So they'll probably get more money for the barrel than they paid for it because it's had Montrachet in the barrel. It makes it a little bit sort of more expensive because you have the leftover flavor of the greatest white wine in the world. Sorry, Clos St. Hune. Beautiful thing. So back to the nose, big brambly, currant, blackberry, blackberry fruits for sure. Currant, cassis, which is what you would use to make a Kir Royale, kind of has that nice pungent sort of blackberry character. I'm getting a little extra whiskey today, and not a lot of Sauvage. When we talk about Cabernet Sauvignon there was a lot of misnomers and misinformation going around before 1996 when Carol Meredith at UC Davis, in conjunction with Foundation Plant Material Service and a number of other scientists all over the world, finally discovered where Cabernet came from. And they tracked it down, and the best scientific knowledge that we have now says probably the Languedoc in the 17th century. All the way back to the 16th century is very possible. So in 1996, Carol Meredith decided that after looking at the full decrypted genome of Cabernet Sauvignon, that it is 50%. It was not a hybrid that was purposefully hybridized. It was a hybrid that just became. But it was not a genetic accession, not a mutation. It was a mistaken crossing, all right, ready for this, of Cabernet Franc and what's the other half of Cabernet Sauvignon? What would you guess? The right answer, Sauvignon Blanc. So Sauvignon Blanc. So, okay, so Jolie and John Rodriguez are thinking about popping an 09 Clos Pepe. Question, I would say go for it. It's 11 years old. I'd say it's a drink or hold for 5 years. But if you got another one, I'd say yes. If you only had one left, I would say drink an older vintage. But I would say there's no time like the present. Celebrate every moment. Tempus fugit. Let's put some of this wine in our mouth. It's time. It's day drinking time. Let's do it. Again, beautiful color. Show it to you on a really beautiful saturated color in this. It's one thing that you learn when you take these WSET and Court of Master Sommeliers tests. Some of the way that you decide and describe color in wine is when you look through the wine at a printed page, whether you can read what's printed on the page. And if you can't, that is considered opaque. And that is one of the darkest descriptors you can use. So I would call this, sort of a, without getting too like, 60s and 70s classic rock history of heavy metal, a little deep purple on, almost opaque in the center of the glass. Like I said, I am getting a little more whiskey today. Maybe my nose is picking up, which is an excellent sign. As long as your nose works and you can taste, it's an excellent sign. And welcome back, Beth. Really appreciate it. Oh, beautiful. So I would say that the wine is somewhere between medium plus to heavy bodied. It has a nice richness, especially for a Cabernet that's normally under $20. It was harvested at night at 27.5 bricks. Let me tell you a little secret about grapes harvested at 27.5 bricks. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but the way that we figure out how high the alcohol is going to be on 27.5 bricks, bricks, remember, the percentage of sugar by volume in the grape. So 25 bricks means 1/4 of the weight of the grape is sugar, 25%. So at 27.5% sugar, sort of a liberal arts educated sort of guess would be somewhere in the area of 17.5% alcohol. And I know for a fact this wine is significantly less than that. It's 14.5. So I could actually figure out how Clay did that. And it wasn't magic. We didn't spin the alcohol out of it. We likely added some very, very high quality water with acidulated water to make the water not lose the acid and the natural balance of the grapes as they came in. So we took really ripe grapes at the same ripeness that they would pick for high-end Napa Cabernet. A little dimpled, a little raisined, a lot of flavor, a lot of character, a lot of richness, a lot of ripeness. So this is a wine that will appeal more to a California drinker than a Bordeaux drinker. I think a Bordeaux drinker would find this wine a little too effusively fruity, a little too effusively, almost a little bit jammy. But if you really pay attention, there's some really wonderful, smoky, complex aroma on the edge of perception running through this wine. I find it to be, and I'm not traditionally a huge cab drinker, but I have been drinking a lot more cab since I've been making it and since I've been showing it and producing it. Obviously did not make any Cabernet Sauvignon at Clopepi, but we've got 1,400 acres at French Camp, so we're going to make up in Paso Robles. So we're going to make some Zin, we're going to make some Petit Syrah, and we're going to make some Cabernet Sauvignon. And normally, again, 100% Cabernet is not my thing. I look at Cabernet as a blending grape, right? Cabernet is a blending grape in France. Try to find a Bordeaux wine that's 100% Cabernet. Chances are I'll try not to hit my table. It keeps moving. It's almost impossible because Cabernet is considered a blending grape. So they don't use 100% Cabernet in Bordeaux, incredibly rarely. Now, there's parts of Bordeaux that are going to be predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, and those wines are generally going to be the most muscular of the Bordeaux. Cabernet is kind of considered the muscle, and this is my perspective, and I've never really talked to a Bordelais about it. Cabernet is the muscle. Merlot is the plushness, the richness, the softness, the velvet. Kind of a smaller chain tannins, a little more velveteen as it ages, and then you've got the weird grapes, the grapes that don't come around. Cabernet Franc for a little complexity and a little probably a little extra acidity because it tends to hold its acid a little bit better. And then you've got Petit Verdot for some color and some minerality. And then Malbec doesn't really make the cut anymore. Too much. Most of it moved down to the Cahors and was also planted down in South America. Cabernet Sauvignon, until Sideways, was the number two planted grape in the New World. A high-end, fine red grape planted throughout basically the history, the modern history of wine, post-prohibition wine, especially in the New World. Yeah, and then in 2015, it overtook Merlot because a lot of Merlot was pulled out because of that movie about men behaving badly that did good and bad things for Pinot Noir. But we'll talk about that at some other time. Let's close up with this Cabernet. Let's talk about what we really want to talk about is what we're going to eat with it. So, you know, I like to say I drink beer standing up, I drink wine at table, and I used to drink spirits between table and the floor or bed, but not so much anymore. Not really doing liquor too much anymore. Kind of a bummer. How's the acidity, oak level, balance? Well, I will definitely say that the acidity is I would say it's spot on and perfect because I don't notice it. It's got structure. It elevates the fruit. It cleanses my palate. It keeps the wine balanced and fresh in my mouth. But I don't think, oh, there's the acid, or oh, was that wine acidulated? Because my mouth is incredibly sensitive to acidulation. Acidulated wine runs across my palate like I've got a penny in my mouth. The last question was, the oak level. So no new oak because the bourbon barrels were already used for bourbon. So I would say the equivalent of new oak to me strikes me at about 25 to 35%. So there's the oak. I mean, it is called barrel burner. It's supposed to really show some nice oak character. So the oak really is being driven by a little of that brown liquor character, but also from a nice toastiness too. Oh, hey, Louise, on the wine. And then TA, titratable acidity, is how much weight of acid is actually in the wine. So one of the best analogies I ever heard of TA versus pH. pH is, think about a 10-gallon aquarium. And you've got 5 gallons of water, okay? And you have 10 fish. The fish are the hydrogen ions. How fast the fish are swimming around in the tank is pH. TA is the weight of the fish if you would take them out of the tank and weigh them. So this is how you think about it. Now, so if I took this amount of wine, put a pH meter in it, and filled the water up, just pure distilled water up to here, what would happen to the pH? It would go up significantly, right? It would go up to, if it started at 3.5 and I put 3 times as much water in it, chances are that you would expect the pH to go up to almost 7. Not even. If I filled it with water to here, the pH would probably only budge maybe 0.2. It probably wouldn't even go to 4. How is that possible? Well, we're just filling the aquarium with more water, which doesn't really do anything to the speed of those hydrogen ions. They just got more room to whip around in. Now, if you said we were going to triple the volume of liquid in this glass, what happens to the titratable acidity? The weight in ratio with the actual entire. Now, if I triple the solution, the ratio is going to go down significantly. So if we start with 6.5 grams of titratable acidity and we triple the liquid, well, that's obviously going to go down to 2. So that's kind of the way that pH and TA works. This is more of a conversation for a Wednesday advanced geek class, but I can't stop myself. I just really can't. Delicious wine, lovely wine. I would definitely think about a steak or Moroccan lamb, maybe a short rib with like a mashed potatoes and gravy. If you're a vegetarian, if you eat cheese, it'll be a lot easier. Cabernet is one of the greatest wines in the world for heavy cheese. So like a nice stinky Epoisse, or a really nice old tome or a Gouda or a Gouda, same thing. I would also think, what else would be good? Oh, stew. You know, any kind of stew would be fantastic. Anything that comes out of a crock pot. Basically anything red meat. Here's an interesting thing. Next time you have sushi that has seaweed, nori, try Cabernet with seaweed. They both actually contain the same molecular compound, this flavonoid, that's shared between Cabernet Sauvignon and seaweed. It always blows me away, but I do it every time in my food and wine pairing classes. I give them seaweed and Cabernet, and usually it does definitely raise a few eyebrows, just how well it goes. I will close tonight with the opportunity, for you guys to ask any questions or comments, and I do go through these, and then remind you of two things. First of all, the Barrel Burner Cabernet, as well as all the wines that I show for the first few weeks in this, any non-J. Wilkes wines are on sale at millerfamilywines.com for $7.50 per bottle and 1 cent shipping per case. So if you want to try a bourbon barrel Cabernet for less than $10 that has an editor's choice from Wine Enthusiast and a 90-point score from the tasting panel, jump on Miller Family Wine Company. I don't know how long this deal is going to last. And remember that the coupon code, the promo code, MW50. M is in Mary, W is in Wes, 50 is the number. And that should automatically, and we just added a new, everyone's been asking about J. Wilkes. And hey, you're the winemaker with J. Wilkes. Why don't we get a good deal on the J. Wilkes wine? We really pushed for you guys. We got, if you buy a case of J. Wilkes, there's an automatic, no promo code needed, reduction of your price by 30%. And if you can also mix and match. So whatever you put in if you put in the MW50, it'll give you all the great deals to take all the wines down to $7.50 on the non-J. Wilkes stuff on the website. And then the J. Wilkes stuff, if you buy you have to buy a full case of J. Wilkes. Then it will apply the 30% discount. And I'm sure we'll be looking at other discounts for the J. Wilkes as well, but that's a heck of a good deal. That means the wines are coming in between about $13 and $24. So really good deal. But if you like Cabernet, I would definitely jump in and buy a 6-pack or a case of this cab. You're not going to be able to get a case of bourbon barrel cab from Paso Robles delivered to your house for under $100. It's just a great deal. Tomorrow will be the first sort of serious and cool class that I'll be teaching and tomorrow will be one you do not want to miss. Tomorrow we're doing Intro to Food and Wine Pairing Part 1. I'm going to teach you, does it matter what wine we put with food and why? And then if we decide, that it is important, I'm going to teach you my rules of food and wine pairing. And if you want, bring in your favorite wine tomorrow, bring in a list of your favorite foods. And tomorrow at the end of the class, you guys can throw food at me and I'll talk to you about what wines that I would throw at those foods. Or you can totally ignore me and just do what most people do and just drink wine and eat food and be happy. Welcome in oak and preferred Eastern European, Hungarian, Slovakian, even Russian oak before the end of World War II because it was a little easier to get. And the wine and the barrels made beautiful wine. At the end of World War II, when the Iron Curtain fell, they lost access to Eastern European oak and began to make a lot more barrels from their own forests. Those made the wines that defined French wines for the Americans that were finishing in World War II and still in Europe after the defeat of the Nazis and the dissolution of the Vichy regime in France. So the 45s, 46s, and 47s were generally made with French oak. Probably very young barrels that had been toasted very, very quickly after the trees had been turned into staves. So there's a couple reasons why French oak is considered to be the best oak in the world, and that is generally it's been used by the greatest French producers in our time. And those French barrels, we never really tasted the Romanée Conti and the Echezot and the Petrus and the Lalas and all these wines that were made using Eastern European oak. What we tasted was all these great wines that were made using French oak. So French oak after World War II became the go-to. It is still the most expensive oak in the world. There are even the word limousine comes from a forest in France that makes probably the best oak for the production of Bordeaux wine. So limousine barrels are considered that way. And French oak tends to be the most complex, the most subtle, definitely has at higher toast levels, a little bit more bacon fat, espresso, toast, vanilla, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of clove, a little bit of baking spice. Eastern European oak, think about it being a little more aggressive. The barrels might not have the same level of quality control that they have in French forests, because maybe they've been doing this longer than the French, but there's a long time where not a lot of people were buying these Eastern European barrels, which are improving. When I'm looking for Eastern European flavor, I'm looking for a little higher vanilla content. I'm looking for a little more rough integration. The oak might be a little more obvious. Sometimes Eastern European oak tastes a little bit like, to me, like the wine was made in a tank with French oak chips, and the chips were a little aggressive. Very, very difficult, even for me, after 25 years of wine production and judging wine, to absolutely know if I'm tasting the difference between Eastern European and French. Very, very similar barrels. Eastern European barrels tend to be about $200, 150 euros less than French. American oak is super easy. Vanilla, coconut, dill. The coconut is usually the one that goes. If I'm smelling a Zinfandel, Petit Syrah, something like that, those are the wines to me that make sense to put, California heritage varietals, maybe Rhones, but definitely not Pinot Noir. I wouldn't put American oak and Cab, not because I'm not a patriot, just because I think that there's a better ingredient. It's the difference between, do you want to use, fresh, beautiful black Paragon truffles, or do you want to use, truffle oil or truffle paste, which is not even made from truffles? Tastes like truffles, but it's not a truffle. And that's kind of the way I feel about American oak in Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, anything where the oak really shows. Maybe if the wine is, if you put 5% American oak and 95% French oak, that's just another spice in the spice box, and that's just going to increase. Welcome, Kent Pierce. Kent, one of Jeff Wilkes' best friends, and we make a wine called Kent's Red to celebrate their friendship. And Kent lives down in Santa Barbara and used to sail with Jeff all the time. So love to see, and fabulous to see him here. That's the quick and dirty story of all that. And then let's see, how much of the oak was new? The equivalent in the barrel burner is about 35% new. But the bourbon barrels that were used for 50% of the production of this, that they lived a year in, those bourbon barrels were probably used to make bourbon between once and 3 times. So the overall flavor of the wine, in my opinion, if someone said, how much new oak is in this wine? Tastes like 40%. And I would say the new oak equivalent in this wine is a little less than that, 25 to 30%. But I think those bourbon barrels give it a little more oak kick. Questions before we close it up today? Remember, tomorrow will be Food and Wine Pairing, Part 1, intro. So I'm going to be breaking down food and wine pairing to just 3 rules. It'll take a little time to explain those rules. And I'll also put some charts up tomorrow that you can look at, and some materials. And I don't know how. I've got some really good PowerPoints on this stuff too. I might try to go through Zoom so we can do a little of that. I don't know. Just know that you can go to the Wes Hagen or the J. Wilkes Wine Santa Barbara Facebook page and be ready to see my head pop up at about 4:50 every day while we're still inside. So I hope all of you enjoyed squinting, trying to figure out what books I filled my head with. I hope you've enjoyed a taste of the Barrel Burner Cabernet Sauvignon. And don't forget, remember, every time we get together, I try to promise 90% of all of our conversations will be topical, and always less than 10% will be commercial. But as I guess Frank Zappa once said, the strictly commercial edge of this is pick up some Barrel Burner, $7.50 a bottle, 1 cent shipping per case. So that's about all for me. I hope all of you had an absolute wonderful time. A couple more questions. Feel free. It's always going to be, yes, it's Michael, it's Michelle, excuse me. It's always going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. And then we're going to talk just a sec. If you guys want to hang out, feel free. I got a couple last questions over on the J. Wilkes Santa Barbara side. The question was, Why use tank with staves over a barrel for the other 50%? So the wine doesn't cost $45 a bottle. So we want to make sure that the wine has a real, honest barrel character. But if we were going to use, first of all, we couldn't get that many barrels. And this is not something that would normally be put out through the marketing department. We want Barrel Burner to be associated with barrels. So we have spent a lot of money and made a lot of investment to make sure those bourbon barrels carry the weight and carry that flavor. But at a $10 glass pour and a $15 bottle price, you're really not going to find wines at that price that are 100% barrel aged. And if you're really careful and you know your stuff, you can make incredibly good wine from some of these mixed methods. Awesome. Welcome, Kristen and Jason. All right. So we said, Christy, I hope that answers your question. And then Dominic was asking, can you discuss yeast selection? Yeast, yeah, let's talk about that on a Friday when we talk about winemaking. All yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. There's actually a couple of different ones, but the same yeast that makes bread and beer is also the yeast that makes wine. And what I will say about yeast is the different strains of yeast have been becoming very, very efficient in producing alcohol. And I think one major issue we have right now is the yeast companies think we all want higher alcohol wines. And I would like to find a way, and I was working with a scientist at Caltech for a while on trying to find out how we can make lazy yeast that may have a way for them to change their metabolic pathways to stop producing ethanol from disaccharide sugar and start producing, I want to make sure I say this right, start producing glycerin or glycerol. So instead of making alcohol, they would make glycerol, which is the part of alcohol or part of wine that gives you the richness in the mouth. So you could still get all that richness and get all that sort of mouthfeel without added alcohol. Because if you can make a ripe wine from 27 bricks, high ripeness fruit, and you wouldn't have to water it down, the final alcohol, if a 27 bricks wine could come in at 15 or 14% alcohol, we'd have another tool in our toolbox. It would be absolutely brilliant. It'd be wonderful. And thank goodness for yeast. I mean, by far in the history of the universe, as far as I know it, the most important industrial microbe. And it's been working. The first chemical bond change that produced energy on the planet Earth was yeast breaking down polysaccharide sugar, disaccharide sugar, down into carbon dioxide and ethanol. So alcohol, ethanol, predates all multicellular life on this planet. So it's not when did mankind invent alcohol. It's not when did Australopithecine afarensis first find some fermented honey in a tree in the Olduvai Gorge that had fallen over and filled with water during a rare rain. Nah, it's not that man invented alcohol. You could have invented maybe alcohol invented man, but that's something for a different time. Hyperbolic, maybe. I could probably debate it with the best of them. Loads of fun. So again, tomorrow, food and wine pairing at 5 o'clock. It will be loads of fun. And Brendan, Mexican style carnitas, J. Wilkes Pinot or J. Wilkes Cab. Depends on where you got it and how the hot sauce is, because that could be a Modelo, or it could be a Modelo Negro, could be a Tecate. You know which Mexican beer I'm not going to ask for you to pour it with. The carnitas, actually, I like it even with a little spice. I like it with a Pinot Blanc. The Smashberry Rosé would be my number one wine for Mexican food if it's not so spicy. My rule is if I sweat a little bit, if I see a little bovine perspiration start to appear on my upper lip area, that is not a wine dish. That is a beer dish, or a dish with some horchata or something that might be, or a lassi if it's Indian food, something like that. But I would say if I had to choose Mexican style carnitas with a Pinot or a Cab, the Cab would require, for me, if there was lots of really good, nice, rich guacamole, the guacamole could definitely hold enough richness to give back to the Cab. Without the guac, with some light salsa, I would definitely do the Pinot Noir. My favorite carnita style, though, the Guerrero Taqueria that's around here. They do it on the spit, on the turning spit. Like it's almost like, what would you see like sort of on a street vendor? They kind of carve it off as it caramelizes. They put it on fresh corn tortillas with slices of pineapple. And if you've never had it sort of that sort of Yucatan style, that's what I think someone told me it was a Yucatan style. Damn. Pineapple with some good carnitas, that just blows my mind. It's one of my favorite proteins in the world because it's sort of a cheap way to get that nice roasted duck or roasted or Thanksgiving sort of dark meat turkey flavor. Carnitas, gotta love it. Appreciate all of you guys coming on. Tell your friends. Tomorrow we're going to learn how to match any food with any wine in a half an hour or less. And I've also been told by our marketing guru that they can't put these up on Facebook if they go longer than 40 minutes. So that means we're going to try to compact this a little bit. And we might cut off some of the Q&A, but I think that's important too. So again, send me 2 things. If you haven't, I'm also making the offer and the call to action. If you buy a case of wine from the Miller Family Wine Company through millerfamilywines.com, make sure to use the MW50 promotion for 1 cent shipping per case and $7.50 for any of these wines outside the J. Wilkes world. If you buy a case of any Miller Family wines during this whole interesting time, just send me a Facebook or an email saying that you have with your address, and I will send you a personal note and a corkscrew. So if you've already done it, great. And you haven't sent me your address, please do that. I would love to reach out and connect you and thank you personally for helping our company through this time. And let's see. Yourself, see you tomorrow. I'll be on about 4:50 tomorrow and starting at 5. We're going to be tasting one wine and then talking about how to match wine and food. So get your foodie friends together, get your chef friends together, and let's talk about this. So really looking forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Again, this starts every day until further notice, including weekends at 5 p.m. And if you want to start with the best quality, you might notice the Wes Hagen link. It looks like I'm kind of looking up in the sky because I'm actually looking at the camera on my other laptop, which is actually recording for J. Wilkes Wine Santa Barbara, where this podcast lives. Thanks again to everyone who watched. Thanks again to everyone who's drinking wine or anything else on the planet. And I would like to raise a toast to my favorite industrial microbe, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Without you, there would be no alcohol, and what a shame would that be. So cheers, take care of each other, show compassion, show love, and recognize science works, and the only reason this feels so damn dangerous is that because we are so damn safe. The internet should also be an absolute utility, so let's make internet a utility. Let's make sure we support science and those who believe in it, and we'll get through this on the other side. We'll be back together, loving each other around a table and not worrying how close we are to each other. So cheers, wonderful, and I hope you guys all learned something and you all have a chance to enjoy this beautiful barrel burner Cabernet. Cheers.